A third Indiana Jones film turning up was about as surprising as a long-lost relative showing up the day after you've won the lottery. No, Auntie Beryl, I am not buying you a Cybertruck. Indiana Jones was on a quest to find his father. Oh, and a little thing called the Holy Grail.
Dad, we're well out of range.
In Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. In 1989, the stars aligned and Indiana Jones was back, cracking whips and smacking Nazis in the face. Steven Spielberg was back in the director's chair for a third film, and he wanted to keep things light after the dourness, dankness, and let's be honest, dickness of Temple of Doom. This time around, George Lucas was on board, and together the pair gave us the breeziest of Indiana Jones adventures. Lighter than a helium-filled loofah hand gliding off a cliff with lots of warm updrafts keeping it in the air. It's not necessarily to the perfection of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's a lot more crowd-pleasing than Temple of Doom, and indeed its belated follow-up.
Why are you trying to kill us? Because you're looking for the Holy Grail!
Last Crusade is easily the most comedic of the films, but describing parts of it as contrived and convenient is not being impolite. An Indiana Jones adventure that's not chock full of miraculous escapes just wouldn't be as much fun. If we ranked films like this based on their grounded reality, we'd have to mark every Indiana Jones film on the mythical horse scale, so Last Crusade would be 3 unicorns and a Pegasus. First, we get a short prologue. Teenage Indiana Jones is out riding horses with his Boy Scout troop when he happens upon some ne'er-do-wells who themselves have happened upon the Cross of Coronado. What follows is an exciting chase sequence where, in the space of a few minutes, we discover the source of Indy's ophidiophobia, which I have learned is not a fear of characters from Hamlet, but a morbid dread of snakes. We learn how Indy started using a whip, and of course, the source of Indy's wardrobe. Some prequel movies take a whole film or even a trilogy to flesh out minor elements such as these, but here the fact that it's all over within a few minutes makes it seem less egregious. Back in 1938, Indy meets with the wealthy amateur archaeology enthusiast Walter Donovan, who whets Indy's appetite with talk of the search for the Holy Grail. Donovan needs Indy's help since their project lead has gone missing.
Why don't you try my father?
We already have. Your father is the man who's disappeared.
Indy has daddy issues, namely he felt his father wasn't there for him while growing up. The two have barely spoken for years, but for once the search for an artifact is secondary to finding his father. Mostly. Henry Jones is one of the world's foremost experts on the Holy Grail. Now, there is someone you really don't want to be stuck next to at a dinner party.
Oh, aren't these crystal glasses lovely?
They're nice enough, I suppose, but they're no Grail. Let me tell you about the Grail.
That's probably the point where you make your excuses and ask the host to call you a taxi. Indy travels to Venice with Marcus Brody to meet Professor Jones' colleague Dr. Elsa Schneider.
What's this one?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Of course, what would an Indiana Jones film be if he didn't get caught up somewhat in the allure of recovering an artifact like the Holy Grail? I mean, he doesn't need the Grail for any practical reason. You could always pop down to Williams-Sonoma to get a full service for much less hassle than traipsing around Europe and the Middle East being chased by Nazis. Indiana Jones was a person that once they got an idea in their head, they had to see it through regardless of the consequence. If you told Indy to stop picking his nose so he wouldn't get so many nosebleeds, 10 minutes later you would find him slumped over unconscious due to excessive blood loss. The trail for the Grail, or the Grail Trail, leads to Indy vandalizing a library in order to find a tomb whose usual inhabitants are long dead corpses and less dead rats. What would an Indiana Jones film be if they didn't have a stomach-churning scene of some description? Indy and Elsa are chased by a group dedicated to keeping the Grail secret, after which Indy just lets this guy, Kazim, walk away after he and his mates twice had tried to kill Indy.
How dare you kiss me?
Leave me alone. I don't like fast women.
Indy and Elsa. Well, I suppose the technical term is hold a private anthropological seminar with each delivering a fully formed thesis. They then head to the castle where Henry is being held captive.
Junior? Yes, sir.
Indy's dad is a little hard to please.
Indy, no!
I will kill her. Go ahead. No!
Elsa turns out to be working for the Nazis, the year being 1938, and her having an Austrian accent wasn't enough of a giveaway.
But you should have listened to your father.
How did you know she was a Nazi?
She talks in her sleep.
Donovan also seems to be working for the Nazis. Like, hang on, hands up here, who is not working for the Nazis?
Yo!
Put your hand down, Frank, no one's buying that. The Jones boys escape and the film then becomes a road trip buddy comedy for pretty much the rest of the film.
Jesus Christ.
That's for blasphemy.
After a detour to Berlin to recover Professor Jones' Grail diary, the final push to recover the Grail begins in the desert. After so much goofy fun and slapstick action and chase sequences, the film goes serious for the final trials in order to reach the Grail. Indy is forced to do the last bit of legwork if he can get the Grail so he can save his father.
Which one is it?
You must choose. Choose wisely.
That's an understatement, guy who's totally not Q.
He chose poorly.
Elsa, who's shown some reluctance to go full Nazi, is in the end an archaeologist first and a Nazi second, just like it says on her LinkedIn profile. She wept at the sight of books being burned, and after everything she's seen, she still wants to recover the Grail. Of course, no dice.
Follow me! I know the way! Ha!
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade ends with Indy, Henry, Sala and Marcus riding off into the sunset, which was fitting as the general idea at the time was that this was the end of the line for the series as a feature film franchise.
You have your father's eyes.
And my mother's ears. But the rest belongs to you.
Dr. Jones. Yes?
Everyone has their rankings for the Indiana Jones films, and I would hastily generalize, and I mean generalize, and say that this is possibly many people's second favorite of the trilogy. Not everyone's, many people's. Last Crusade isn't a pure adventure like the first film, nor is it dark like the second, and nor is it whatever the hell the fourth one is. Last Crusade is almost a comedy for most of its runtime.
I came here to save you. Oh yeah? And who's gonna come to save you, Junior?
The banter between Indy and Henry, that of a son trying to reconnect with a remote parent, is delicious.
Well, they don't come any closer than that.
Marcus and Sala are a bit sillier than before.
Thank you, sir. Little fish make love in it.
And as Elsa's heel turn happens relatively early on, there's no love interest in the second half of the film, allowing Indy and Henry to just talk.
What do you want to talk about?
Of course, they both have a lot in common. They're both named Henry, they both love archaeology, and as it turns out, they both slept with Elsa.
I can't forget how wonderful it was.
Thank you. It was rather wonderful.
Oh, how awkward. Last Crusade began with Lucas becoming excited by the concept of a search for the Holy Grail, while Spielberg liked the idea of the film being about Indy repairing his relationship with his father. Original versions of the story had a Scottish castle and a monkey king in among elements that made it into the final version of the film.
Please, what does it always mean? This Junior? That's his name. Henry Jones Jr.
Indiana Jones was heavily inspired by Bond to begin with, so having Sean Connery as Indy's dad made sense. Connery was only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, and when contacted about the role, he had some reservations, probably for lunch at the golf club in Marbella, but he also had some thoughts on the script.
Like Indiana.
We named the dog Indiana.
His character's original name of Professor Samson Sesame Jones was changed to Henry Jones over concerns that Ford might drown when filming two shots.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Connery and Ford together are a joy to behold. The two bicker,
Don't call me Junior.
are competitive with each other, and will approach problems in vastly different ways. The elder Jones takes a more academic approach to archaeology and is generally less comfortable in the field.
There were rats, Dad.
Right?
Jones Sr. calls his son Junior for most of the film,
Junior, you did it.
only calling him by his preferred name at the end.
Indiana.
Of course, Connery agreed to appear in this film, which made it impossible for him to appear in another film released the same year, Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, where that film's director William Shatner wanted Connery to play the villain. This would prove to be one of the few times that Sean Connery had picked the better of two parts offered around the same time.
They got us.
Irish actress Alison Doody was about 21 when she was cast, young for an archaeologist, but too old to be the heroine of anime by about 10 years.
It's a Nazi.
What? Trust me.
Elsa is torn between that loyalty to her bosses, remember folks, actual Nazis,
Nazis. I hate
hate these guys.
And archaeology, which is still about 1,000 years away from being about actual dead Nazis.
Brody's got friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again.
Does anyone understand a word I'm saying here? Mr. Brody!
Denholm Elliot plays Marcus Brody as a man who's not in his element outside of his museum, and John Rhys-Davies returns as Sala. The villain of the piece, Donovan, is played by Julian Glover, an actor I like in most roles, but apparently not when he puts on an accent.
Eternal life, Dr. Jones. The gift of youth to whoever drinks from the Grail.
And of course we need a Nazi thug to jeer at and cheer when he gets splattered across the desert, here played by Michael Byrne. Kevork Malikian plays Kasim from the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, basically a store detective making sure people don't shoplift the Holy Grail. Comedian Alexei Sayle makes a brief appearance as a car-obsessed sultan.
Can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 12.5 seconds.
And actor and stuntman Pat Roach does appear in the third Indiana Jones film Just, where his larger role was cut from the final film.
It's only a snake.
When it came time to cast someone as a younger Indiana Jones, River Phoenix was suggested by Ford, as he considered Phoenix to be somebody who looked most like Ford as a teenager.
That's the cup of a carpenter.
Well, Harrison Ford was the expert. He made his living as a carpenter for years before his career as an actor and emergency room patient really took off. Last Crusade is a beautiful looking and exceptionally well made film. John Williams brings another one of his classic scores, and it's one of the most fun films that's been made by Lucas and Spielberg. The only thing better than watching The Last Crusade on movie night is watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and then Last Crusade on a movie night. Unless, of course, you're watching with Dr. Henry Jones.
Oh dear.
When I first saw it, I thought it was okay rather than great, but over the years it has just become one of my favourite films of the late 1980s.
How does one get off this thing?
By the late 80s, Harrison Ford's star had gotten bigger and bigger, though outside of Star Wars, Blade Runner and Indiana Jones, he tended to play dramas and comedies. In the 90s, without any of those fantasy franchises in the works, he would star in more thrillers and action roles, increasing his chances of horrific injuries. But I'm not kink-shaming. Sean Connery's career was now a mix of lead roles and supporting characters, though his best roles tended to be in the latter category, especially those where he wasn't wearing the hairpiece. Last Crusade, released in the brutal summer of 1989, where a lot of films were smothered at the box office by Batman, managed to hold its own, bringing back treasure without having to murder anyone that we know of.
That's how Austrians say goodbye.
It was a fitting send-off to Indiana Jones, though Lucas would quickly begin work on Young Indiana Jones Chronicles on television, which he used as an early test bed for using video and computers to increase the scale of his productions. Harrison Ford would appear as an older Indy in one episode, but it would be 2008 before Ford, Spielberg and Lucas reunited for a fourth Indiana Jones film.
Be careful. You might get exactly what you wish for.
Well, that's a collective hate boner we'll talk about another time.
I can't think of anything.
Then what are you complaining about?
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.